Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me today to learn a little bit about Open Educational Resources, or OERs for short. First, I'll provide some general information on open access and OERs. Then I'll talk about how OERs are being used by libraries and what some of the benefits and challenges of using these important resources are. And finally, we'll highlight a few successful implementations of OERs. First off, before we dive into the focus of this video, let's briefly talk about the broader topic of open access. Open access refers to all kinds of materials, text, audio, video, and more that have been made freely available to everyone. According to UNESCO, a resource is considered open access if it's freely accessible to everyone, other than the cost of accessing the internet itself, if the author gives everyone permission to use, reuse, and distribute the resource, often through systems like Creative Commons, and finally, if that resource is added to one or more of the widely accessible open access repositories that exist today. The importance of open access is that, to put it simply, as UNESCO says, without dissemination, knowledge remains invisible. If we dig a bit deeper, open access resources help close the gap in access to knowledge by removing many of the obstacles that prevent researchers and the public accessing and using the wealth of information that's already been discovered. Finally, while most open access resources are educational or scientific in nature, like the open educational resources we're discussing today, not all open access resources are strictly educational or utilitarian in nature. Some entertainment resources exist there as well. Now that we have a better idea of the broader concept of open access that open educational resources fall into, let's talk about them a little bit more. UNESCO defines open educational resources as all kinds of learning, teaching, and research materials in any format or medium that are either public domain or under an open license, like Creative Commons, that will permit no-cost access, reuse, repurpose, and adaptation, and redistribution by others of that particular resource. Some examples of OERs include open textbooks, which are just like their commercial counterparts but allow for greater access and flexibility. Open course packs, which are collections of open access materials that have been tailored to accompany a specific class. And MOOCs, or massively open online classes, which are freely available online classes that are usually asynchronous, self-paced, and created entirely of open access materials. Libraries, particularly academic and research libraries, are the perfect types of organizations to utilize and promote OERs, and there are two key ways that they can engage in these important resources to benefit their communities. First, all libraries are able to integrate OERs into their own collections to make it easier for their community members to access these beneficial resources for lifelong learning. Just because these resources are freely available doesn't necessarily make them easy to find, and libraries are the perfect institutions to improve this access. Second, academic and research libraries in particular are able to work with the educators in their broader institutions to help them understand the benefits and limitations of OERs, and to find and adopt such resources to use in place of or along with the traditional course materials in their classes. By helping educators, libraries not only help the students in their classes, but also fosters a stronger relationship between the library and faculty. Now that we've taken the time to talk about the benefits that OERs can bring to libraries and their communities, let's take a bit of time to look at the challenges that libraries face when it comes to integrating OERs into their collections and helping their communities best utilize them. First, and perhaps most importantly, while OERs are free to use, reuse, and distribute, these resources do have costs associated with creating and modifying them in the first place, and then of course implementing the technology to integrate these resources into a library's catalog and make them accessible to users is decidedly not free. These costs manifest themselves not just in the form of direct monetary costs to the organization, but also in the form of the time requirements by library staff and potentially faculty to prepare these resources for later use. Second, particularly for academic libraries, in addition to the challenges of implementing OERs in the library itself, libraries may face some difficulty in getting faculty on board with using OERs in place of traditional course materials. Faculty may experience this barrier to adoption for a variety of reasons, all the way from believing that commercial resources are better than open access ones, to just general departmental disagreement that make any change, even desired ones, difficult. Finally, here are some incredible examples of libraries, professional organizations, and governmental agencies that are working to improve access to OERs both in their communities and at large. First is the Open Access for Student Educational Success, or OASES, program at Texas A&M University, where subject librarians are teaming up with faculty in order to create and implement open educational resources for students to use in courses. There's also the Open Education Resource Initiative, or OERI, that the California community colleges have created to help share open access and open OER materials. Then we have, over in Europe, we have the European Network of Open Education Librarians, a professional association that helps connect librarians focusing specifically on OERs and other open access materials. And then finally, we have LIBER, a research library professional association in Europe, who has an educational resources working group that has done a great amount of work focusing on open educational resources. I hope that in the short time we've had together today, I've been able to share a little bit about open educational resources, their importance in libraries, and some of the key benefits and challenges they pose. Finally, check out these great resources to learn more about OERs and their importance in libraries.